Very quiet, very good. Okay. Well, let's hope we're going to wake you up now. We're going to talk about disasters, okay? Imagine suddenly you realise your site is blacklisted from Google, or you log in and suddenly realise there are other users on your site, users you didn't set up. That would give me the creeps now. Or, what else? Simply you look at the front end of your site and you realise, oops, your site has been hacked. What are you going to do? Now, to find out what to do in such a situation, we've got Kylie Thorpe here. She is a WordPress specialist from 34sp.com, and she will tell us how to clean up a hacked WordPress site. Thank you very much. Come on over.
Right. Hi everyone. My name's Kayla and I'm from 34sp.com. We're a hosting company based in Manchester, and my job there is I'm a WordPress support specialist. And what that means is we're a support company, so people with websites, they'll call us up if they host with us, and we help them with problems. And that's really fun because it's nice to help people, and so that can mean anything from, I've forgotten my email password, to the dreaded, my site looks completely different today, I'm quite worried. And they're not the most fun calls we get, as you can imagine, but I'm going to be talking today about what we do to help people with hack sites, the kind of cleanup process we go through on a day-to-day basis, because most WordPress website hacks, they're all completely different. There's so many different ways any website can be hacked. I'm just going to be talking about the kind of process we go through to try and clean up the vast majority of our cases, because we have a cleanup routine which we found to be quite successful and help users get back on their feet with kind of minimal chance of reinfection of the hack. So I'm just going to be talking about what we go through and how you can spot a site hack and some of the sort of things you can do afterwards to prevent it from happening again. And hopefully it's not going to be too scary, because hack sites can be a scary subject, but my hope by doing this talk is to kind of reassure people that there's always something you can do, and hopefully we can prevent any kind of drastic loss of data in the future. So I'll jump right in with the kind of things you would expect when you're trying to spot whether or not your site is hacked. There's many different ways a site can be hacked, as I say. So I'm just going to talk about some of the kind of things people call us up with when the usual result is that, unfortunately, they have a hacked website. So this is you. You've made a website. It's awesome. It might be your business website, it might be a personal blog. Either way, you put a lot of work into this website, because websites are a lot of work. So it'd be really awful if something happened to it. And you've made your website, you update it whenever your scheduling allows you to, and you work happily away at it. And then one day you might find that the site, you go over to your nice little cat website with your blog and your picture of your cat, and it's a very happy website, but you go over to it one day and it might look completely different. And this is one of the most common kind of signs that we see that a site might be hacked. So you might go over to your website one day and the content might look different. There might be links to adverts in it that weren't there before. It might redirect to a completely different website. And these are all quite usual signs that there might be something a little bit wrong. So that's one of the most common ways you will find to spot a website hack. Another thing that might be a symptom of your website having some sort of malicious code or hacking in it is you might go over to your website and suddenly it's a lot slower than usual. This isn't necessarily suggesting that it's hacked. There's many reasons a website could be slow. You could have something running on it on a scheduled basis and it just gets slow from time to time. But unexplained slowness, and when it's really slow and there doesn't seem to be any reason, it could be a sign that a bit more is going on in the background. The best thing to do is, if you find your site is acting slower than usual, is just call your hosting provider or your developer, whoever manages your website and is the person responsible for kind of making sure that it runs nice and smoothly. Give those a ring, have a chat with them, and they might help you look through, and hopefully you won't find that the site's hacked, but if they do, this is one of the things that could be a symptom of that. Another really kind of common symptom we see with hacked websites is you may or may not be the person who looks at your website's files. WordPress is quite nice and you don't usually need to look at your website's files. You just edit within the dashboard. But if you look at your website via FTP frequently for whatever reason, you might find these extra files that are there all of a sudden, and they're usually named it really weirdly. So, for example, most of WordPress's core files have WP- something, so WP config, WP load, things like that. So it's usually quite easy to spot what's part of your WordPress installation and what's not. Usually, these kind of malicious PHP files that people add into websites, it looks like someone smashed the keyboard and put .php at the end, basically. Or they might have really weird names, like I've genuinely seen some called hacks.php and swearword.php and stuff, and it's like, you could have tried a little harder to click to make it less obvious, but you know. So if you're not sure about these files, because there might be genuine files that are not part of WordPress in your installation, what you can do is you can take a look at the file if you want. You don't have to. You can just open it in a file editor and take a look at the code. And usually, coded PHP files have just nice inline code with comments, and whether or not you are familiar with code, usually you can kind of see, okay, this looks like it's actually doing something to do with my website. Whereas when you open up these kind of files, these hack PHP files, they usually look a little something like this. So you might have your file with a nice bit of inline code in it, and then it's suddenly got this big block of what looks like gobbledygook. But it's encoded kind of malicious. It's encoded malicious code, if that makes sense. And basically, usually something's decoding this and running it on the website and using it to spam people or to attack other websites, that kind of thing. So if you see something like this and you're like, that looks a bit weird, usually your instincts will be right. If something looks a bit weird, then something might not be quite right. And the other scenario is you might have no idea your site's hacked. It might be running completely as normal. You might think everything's nice and fine and that's great. But you might get a call one day off someone who manages your website, off your hosting provider potentially, and they might give you a call and go, bad news, we found your website's hacked. And as someone who's given one of those calls, it's one of the most rubbish calls you can give someone, because it immediately starts this kind of panic, oh no, my site's been hacked, what do I do? Am I going to lose everything? Type of thing. So usually we'll offer to help people with stuff like this, and whoever manages your website might also give you some advice, help you clean it up. So these are the ways you might find that your website is hacked, and if you do, I'm just going to talk about what we do about that. So worst has happened, we've got a hacked website, going to go through the kind of cleanup process that we go through and hopefully give some reassurance that when you find your site is hacked, there's stuff you can do about it in any scenario. So, first things first, your website's hacked. Let's not panic straight away, because in the vast majority of cases, hacked websites can be restored to some extent. You might already have backups. Put your hands up if you take website backups. That's good. Not everyone put their hand up. You should take website backups, because this could happen at any point, and you always want a backup on your website that you can go back to. There's plenty of WordPress plugins that can give you backups. So things like Updraft, BackWP Up, VaultPress. There's lots of WordPress backup plugins. get one on there and just set it up, and then at least you've got a copy of your website. Your hosting might take backups for you. That'd be nice if they did. And yeah, or you can take manual backups yourself. Just if you've got backups, there's always something you can go back to. The hack cleanup guide that I'm going to go through actually doesn't use too much from a backup. So hopefully that's reassuring for those of you that don't have backups, because it might give you some assurance that if you go home today and find the website's been hacked, there might be stuff you can still do. But take backups because it's very important. So I'm going to get on to our cleanup process that we do in my office on the day-to-day basis. It might not catch 100% of hacks, but I'm going to talk about that towards the end. We found that it does catch the vast majority of the kind of things we see on a regular basis. So there's a few things to do before we start the cleanup process. We've got a hacked website, we're very sad, but let's start working on getting this back to normal. So first thing we do is we take a backup there and then, because depending on the type of website, say it's a shop website, for example, and they have daily backups, but the backups are taken at 1 a.m. They've had 10 orders since then. That's still data they would most probably want to get restored back into their website. So we take a backup before we do anything else. Even if there's hacked content in the backup, there's little bits we might need from it later on. If this is something that you're managing yourself, you can talk to your provider and they might help you get this back up. Things like that. You can just get started with hopefully having someone to help you along with that. The next thing we do after taking our backup of the website is we also disable mail from the actual server, because there's a mail service on your hosting server, which is kind of how your website forms and things work. Disabling that is usually something we do because a lot of these hacks kind of exploit forms and SMTP plugins and try and send out mail, basically. Try and send out spam to other people. So as a standard, we disable mail while we're doing this cleanup. The next part of the cleanup process, after we've got our backup and we're ready to begin digging in and getting stuff out of the site, is it's basically a case of taking a bunch of lists, really. So WordPress, out of the box, is the exact same website for everyone who downloads WordPress for the first time. You've got all your core files, and it's all the same for everyone else. What we want to do is we want to take lists of the unique content on our website, and that means things like your plugins. So plugins aren't going to be the same for every website, so you want to know what plugins your website is using. And all we're going to do is, for now, we're just going to make a list of those plugins. So this can be a list by writing down in a text file, you can write it down on paper. However, just take a list of your plugins. If you're familiar with it, you can use WP CLI to quickly list your plugins. Just get a list of the plugins that are on your website. And then we'll do the same for the theme. Now, the theme, when it comes to the theme, we're going to have a little bit of fun with the theme, because usually when you list your theme, it's something that's available within the WordPress repository. But there's different restore processes for things like premium themes. Excuse me. So for now, we're just going to list the name of our theme and take it from there. So we've got a list of our plugins and our themes. The next part of unique content to our website is things like our users, our posts, our pages, all the kind of things content-wise that make our website what it is. So we want to take a backup of that. And you can take a backup of just that stuff within WordPress by going to the built-in export tool within WordPress. So if you go into Tools and then Export, and then you can choose Data to Export. It's got things, so as well as posts and pages, if you've got something like WooCommerce, it'll have your products, your orders, things like that. Custom post type data will be in there. So you just click All Content on this page, and then click to export it. And that generates an XML file with all that data in it, and it downloads it to your computer. So you've got all that unique content backed up on your computer at this point. And you can also do that via WP-CLI, and you kind of get the impression that people who are familiar with WP-CLI and using the command line, you can quickly do this. You can run a few commands and you've quickly got your list of plugins, themes, and it's a much quicker process if you're familiar with that kind of thing. So we've got our backup that we took before the hack. We've got our list of plugins, themes, and we've got all our unique content, post pages, custom post types, everything like that. We're at a point where we've got everything that makes our site unique backed up in some way. So the next step that we do is we blow up the website. We get rid of it. This can be deleting the contents of your public HTML, your HTTP docs. Just get rid of the WordPress website. You've backed up everything that makes that website unique. I know it might seem a little drastic, but we're going to go through the restore process and talk about why we do this. So we've cleared our hosting. We're going to start from scratch. It's fine. There's a few things we do just before we start the cleanup process, and this might be stuff that users might not have access to. So it might be worth speaking to your hosting provider if you are trying to do a hack cleanup yourself. And we check the cron lists. That's the WordPress cron list, which you can check with WP-CLI, or the cron list on the server. Crons are scheduled tasks that run on your server. So, for example, WordPress backups usually set a cron within WordPress to run that on a scheduled basis. But sometimes dodgy scripts and things like that can add nasty crons that will add hacks back into your site at a scheduled time. So we make sure there's nothing like that going on, because that would be really rubbish. And we clean up the crons, and then we move on. And we also check the temp file on the server as well. This is a kind of root level access folder where sometimes we see dodgy little files being added there. It's just kind of one of those places where we know sometimes things will be added. Doesn't happen all the time, but that's just one of the extra checks we go through before we start restoring the website. And then, once we're happy that we have a server that is still intact and the website's gone, we're fairly convinced that by getting rid of everything, we've deleted that hacked content, because it'll be something on the website. It'll be a hacked plugin, hacked theme, something like that, files added here and there. By getting rid of all the files, we basically can start from scratch and add clean versions of everything to the site. So let's start with a clean version of WordPress. So this means go into your hosting. At this point, it's as if it was brand new. You can just go and install WordPress onto your hosting. You can do that with your hosting provider's one-click installer. You can do it manually by downloading the files from the website. However you go about installing WordPress for the first time, just go through that process and set the site up from scratch. And then you'll have the WordPress website as it is out of the box. Then we revisit these lists that we made. So we've got a list of our plugins and our theme. Now, with the plugins, WordPress plugins should be the same for every user. The vast majority of people don't edit the code that's in a plugin, because there's no need to, really. Most plugins have all the same code with a few different options here and there. So you can just install them from scratch and it would be like they were always there, providing you haven't edited any plugins manually yourself in the code. So we can just reinstall all our plugins one by one. You can take the list, go into WordPress, install your plugins manually. You can use WP-CLI and just list them off and install them all back that way. And we do the same for the theme. Now, with the theme, it's a bit harder because most people might just download a standard WordPress theme from the repository. And if that's the case, great, you can go over there and reinstall that theme as you did. Depending on what you have, you might have a premium theme. And if you have a premium theme, that means going over to the website you bought your theme off and downloading the fresh version from there. And the other scenario is you have a custom theme that someone's built for you. Now, hopefully, if you have the custom theme that someone's someone's made for you, hopefully you have the original version of that or access to reinstall it. If you don't, this is when we go into that territory of potentially restoring from the backup, for the theme at least. Hopefully we don't need to do that because the site's been hacked somehow and we don't want to put things back on there from the backup that was hacked. Excuse me. So, you can restore the theme if you absolutely have to, and we'll go through doing that kind of thing when we come to it. But for now, we've reinstalled our plugins and our themes, and now we're going to go back to that backup that we took, and we're going to restore the uploads. Now, we've backed up everything. We backed up our plugins, themes, custom content. The only thing that's custom to our website that we haven't backed up yet was the uploads. So we take that backup that we took of our site and we go to the uploads folder and we re-import those uploads via FTP and just stick them in there. Before we do that, we will check for things like PHP and PLXE, any kind of files that aren't images or PDFs that shouldn't be there, and we just clear them out. So yeah, we get those uploaded like that. Sorry, I've got a bit of a tickle in my throat, which is unfortunate. Then we run the WordPress import tool. So we've uploaded our plugins, our theme. We've got our custom content restored using the import tool. Sorry, let me go back. We've got our plugins, themes, and our uploads back in place. That's all we need now is that custom content from our XML backup. So that's our post pages, things like WooCommerce orders, things like that. We go into WordPress and go into tools and then import. And this basically pulls all that data back in. So things like your orders, your products, users, and post and page content. That's all the custom content being re-imported back into your site. The reason we do this after the plugins is, say you do have a bunch of products on your website and you run the import tool. WordPress isn't going to know where to assign things like products to unless you have the plugin that's relevant to them. So this is always the last step that we'll do in the restore process. We'll run the import after we've got all our plugins back in place so it knows what to do with this stuff. And this is just a page of where you go to do that. So again, like before, it's tools, but then it's import, go down to WordPress, and then you can select that XML file off your computer and get that uploaded. And this is what you're left with. Now, this kind of looks like our website in the sense that all our posts are there, our pages are there. The site looks kind of similar, my images are there. The only thing that's kind of different is the layout. So this restore process puts everything unique to your website back in it, but it doesn't back up things like, say you've got a plugin with some custom options, some tick boxes here and there, say you've got your theme, say you've got a default WordPress theme and you've got the background colour set to blue in the theme options. Little things like that sadly don't get kept with this backup process because we don't back up the database. We don't restore it back from your SQL backup. And that's because there could be hacked content within the database and things like that. But usually by this point you're in a situation where you're fairly confident that the hack is not back on your website. And that means that with a little bit of reconfiguring, so just putting your plugin options and your theme options back in place, hopefully you're in a scenario where you've got a clean website and after maybe 10 to 30 minutes, a little bit of playing around, you'll be back to normal. And we find that this is kind of the safest way that we found to restore a website, because by getting rid of everything and having brand new everything, the chances of the hack coming back have been next to zero. We've had really good luck with this hack cleanup process. So after we've done this, there's a few little extras we do. We check the users on our website because we exported and re-imported users. Just make sure that all the users that are on the website are users that you expect to be there. Get rid of any that shouldn't, especially people who might have not been at the company for a while, people like that. Just make sure everyone who's got access to the website is someone who should. If you're worried that a user has been into your WordPress site, who shouldn't be, or maybe a legitimate user has an insecure password and you become aware of that, if you want to, give all your user passwords a reset. It's a nice step to take if you think that that might be one of the things that contributed to this problem. And do the same for your FTP users, because a insecure WordPress user password is just as unsafe as an insecure FTP password. So do a bit of password resetting. And now that we've got our website back, I'm just going to quickly talk through some prevention steps. Firstly, the most common reason we kind of see hacked websites is because of things not being kept up to date. So make sure you're running your plugin, core and theme updates as regularly as you can. Don't get yourself in a situation where you can't update things with premium plugins. You have to keep paying for licenses and things like that to get updates. So make sure you can always update your website. Talk to your hosting provider about backups and the differences between shared and non-shared hosting, because they're all kinds of things that can contribute to the integrity of your website. As I said before, this hack cleanup won't catch 100% of cases. We've seen odd little hacks afterwards where we've cleaned up the website and it's been great. But in particular, a good example is we've seen website hacks where people have inserted redirect code into the actual post content of some websites. And because we export that and re-import it using the XML importer, sometimes that doesn't work quite as well as you would hope. But we've installed Fresh Everything on the website. So however they got in, we're pretty sure that that's been fixed, because there's a new database there, there's new passwords for everything. So usually it's a case of doing a search and replace on that database at that point. This is just an example to kind of get across that every WordPress hack is different, and whilst we've found that this restore process does catch the vast majority of cases that we see, and they don't get hacked again in the vast majority of cases, there are the odd extra little kind of wildcard ones where a little bit of extra work is needed. And yeah, hopefully that was helpful. I got a bit of a tickly throat there, so thanks for bearing with me.
Well, I think you all agree that was really interesting, very effective and well detailed. Thank you. If you have any questions for Kaylee, yes, please.
So on a website like with Black Knight and a lot of others now, in the latest update from WordPress, you can export out your backups, but to re-import them, you're limited on the size of the import.
Oh, right, okay.
To bring back in the backups. I mean,
So WordPress limitation.
yeah, and it's been such they've brought down the size of the import now. So
Yeah, that's usually something that's put in place by your WordPress configuration. So if you are limited in the size of the imports you can do, speak to your provider, because they might have tools on their side, so they can kind of take care of that bit for you.
Sorry, I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but shouldn't a person keep an eye or keep a record of any CSS changes that they've added to their theme beforehand, so that they can very easily add it in subsequently?
They can do. The better course of action, rather than making notes of changes to the theme, is to use a child theme. So if you've got changes that you've made to a theme, if you put them in a child theme, then you're not having to re-edit a main theme, and you can just restore the child theme and it'll be back to normal. So that's usually the way to go about that.
Should you install your theme or your plugins first, after when you're reinstalling everything?
Yeah, it doesn't matter too much, to be honest, because we import the data to do with them later on. Usually what I do is I do the theme first and then the plugins, but I don't see any harm in doing it the other way, because we restore the custom data after the fact.
And in the sorry, quick question.
Yeah.
In the export, are you not potentially save or exporting some of the potentially dangerous files? Or is it just going to be in the posts?
Yeah, the XML export tool just deals with settings and content. It doesn't take any kind of data out of PHP files. Okay. It's all kind of the custom content that's stored in your database. Okay. So the only time that's going to export the hack is if someone's put actual code in the content of your posts and things like that. So it's not going to happen, but it's less likely to happen by doing it that way, rather than exporting the SQL file and then re-importing that.
Okay, just one last thing, sorry. Would you be able to, would a non-techie person who might know their CSS and their HTML, would they be able to recognize in the background text of a post if there was something that didn't look quite right there?
Potentially, it depends on what they've done really, because it could be anything from sometimes you'll go to your post content and you'll see that suddenly you've got all these advert links in it. That's fairly obvious, but there's other ones where, so there's a really smart one, there's one that I've seen where they'll put a redirect in the post content, but the redirect doesn't work the second visit round. So someone like yourself who visits the site regularly, you've got a cookie set and for some reason it bypasses that and you see the website, but other people visit your website for the first time and they're redirected somewhere else. That's one of the more weird ones that I've seen. But in that case, you've probably got an idea that something's not going right, because people will be like, I'm going to your website and being redirected, and you'll be like, oh well, I'm not. But you can speak to your hosting provider and they can help you kind of locate what's going on there. So it basically depends on what kind of hack you're dealing with, really.
We have another question in the back.
Okay. Hello.
My name is Christian. I noticed in your presentation that you don't restore the database, and I understand why. But I'll give an example. Let's say you build an e-commerce website, and you are using Stripe or PayPal as a payment gateways, right? All your financial data actually is stored on the database, and for the clients, this kind of information is vital. If you don't restore back the database, how you get all that financial transaction information back into your website? It must be some kind of database cleaning tool or something like that to get rid of the hacks.
Yeah, with the WordPress XML exporter, it does export order details. So any kind of orders on your website are exported and re-imported as part of that. I'm not too sure what Stripe had specifically, but if there is necessary data that's in your database and you need it, then when you take the backup at the start, include the database. And the database is one of those things where we try not to restore it, but there's sometimes it is unavoidable with things that the XML tool might not include. So yeah, I would agree. Sometimes it is necessary to restore the database, but overall we try and avoid that.
Time for one last question, and then afterwards, Kay's going to go to the support room as well. But we're also going to have a coffee break, so when it's here, right, you can ask them any more questions. So maybe we take the gentleman over there. The last question, please.
Thank you. Great talk. I just had a question on security plugins. There's a lot of WordPress security plugins out there, plenty of premium ones as well.
Yep.
Would you recommend, as part of the prevention, having one of those on the site? Are there any? Is it essential, or is it kind of nice to have? Or
it depends on whether. I think they're certainly nice to have, but you kind of want to talk to your hosting provider about it, really, because I know for us specifically, things like WordFence. WordFence is a great plugin, but it duplicates a lot of the kind of stuff we take care of on the server level. So things like IP blocking and some optimization stuff, things like that. It's worth checking with your individual hosting provider whether or not they think it's necessary. Because at the end of the day, if someone's got a hosting and WordFence, they've got two things doing the same job. It's not as bad as if nothing was doing those jobs. So yeah, I think security plugins are good, but have a talk to your hosting provider about how necessary they think they are, because you might find that your hosting provider is doing a lot of the stuff already for you.
Perfect. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there. So that Kay, you're going to be in the support room, just going to come outside go down the corridor to the kindergarten on your left hand side. We're also going to have a coffee break now, and we will go back at 20.